That is the sign that we can actually start today's happy hour. I'm very happy and grateful to chair this session today. My name is Juri Tijdink. I'm a researcher, principal investigator at the Amsterdam UMC and also at the VU University, mainly on the topic of research integrity and research culture. And today we have, as every month, we have the NRIN Netherlands Research Integrity Network Happy Hour. I'm grateful that so many people made it today, and it's also a special topic that we're going to talk about today. It's about ethics in AI. It is a very hot topic, and we are very grateful to have two experts, I must say, on this topic. The first one is the speaker of today, which is Mohammad Hosseini, and the second one is Katrina Miller, who will serve as a referee. This is also the general program that we have. So you, as maybe some of you are new here today, we start with a 25 lecture by Mohammed today. Then there's a referee, which is Katrina Miller, who will have can have the first questions that will take about 10 minutes. And then the floor is open for discussion. For the rest, everyone can ask a question. You can do that live by unmicrophoning yourself, by unmuting yourself, I think, in this, or you can also put it in the chat during the session, and I will definitely try to come back to all the questions when I moderate the discussion afterwards. So that's in a nutshell the how we're going to do it. And I'm more than happy to introduce the two experts today. First of all, Mohammed, welcome. Mohammad Hosseini. He's an assistant professor in the Department of Preventive Medicine in the Division of Health and Biomedical Informatics at Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine. And he holds a PhD in research ethics and integrity that he received in 2021 in Dublin, Ireland. And then in September 21, he moved from Europe to Chicago to start a postdoctoral project first. And then he became an assistant professor there recently. He is interested in topics related to technology ethics, including AI, artificial intelligence, of course. Furthermore, he teaches research ethics and integrity in the context of humanities and the social sciences, as well as in the health sciences, and not only at his own university, but at several universities, including universities in Europe, such as the VU University that I'm also connected with. And he has a fascination for ethics of employing technology such as AI and generative AI in research. And recently you have really started writing a lot about these topics and also publishing, which is great. And finally, I'm happy to mention that you're also that you can put this specific expertise in the limelight in your role as a member of the Global Young Academy. Welcome, Mohammed. I would like to invite you to share your screen, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. You didn't introduce Katerina.
No, I will do that when the referee starts, if that's okay. That's okay. But yeah.
Great. Thanks for that introduction. I hope that you can see my full screen now.
Yeah.
Great. So it's an honor to be here. I have a soft spot for the things that happen in the Netherlands, and the happy hour is also one of them. I follow what you're doing, and I can say that the level at which the debate happens in the Netherlands is the envy of many countries. So you're doing a great job, and it's great to be here. So today we're going to talk about the ethics of using AI in research. I have to add that my research is funded, and I'm grateful for the funders. Thanks. What I'm hoping to sort of achieve today is to briefly summarize and present a paper that I have written with David Resnick about AI ethics. The paper has been accepted by the Journal of AI Ethics and will hopefully be published in the next few days. And this is what I will do. I will start with highlighting some recent use cases of AI in research. and we'll then discuss some specific ethical issues. And then I will briefly explore the recommendations we have in the paper and the rationale for them. And we'll then hopefully, have a conversation about what we discuss. And I will looking forward to also learn from you all about your experiences and views. So we know that AI is being used in research at a very fast pace. Like there's a growing footprint of AI, and the applications are so varied and so interesting. Like they span from analyzing data and images, data collection, data interpretation, creating images, generating hypotheses, modeling, designing molecules and material, generating data for use in various different contexts, searching and reviewing the scientific literature, writing and editing papers, grant proposals, all kinds of forms and applications that we in academia use can now be written or be co-written with AI. We also see them being proposed as possible solutions for reviewing scientific papers and other research output. They're also being used for brainstorming or as a sparring partner. And I think this is quite an interesting one because it was one of those tasks that we used to do together. Like we as humans used to do brainstorming together. That was the whole idea of brainstorming. And now people can actually use an AI to brainstorm and to prompt different questions for themselves to ponder and to explore. It's also being used for translation, and the use cases are numerous. But what is interesting is that the use cases are not only happening in one specific discipline. So, for instance, I've seen use cases of AI in archaeology, marine biology, astrophysics, biochemistry, like everywhere they are being used. And I think that is a prompt for all of us to be aware that this technology is not going away. It's here to stay. And it is to our own benefit to try to familiarize ourselves with its strengths and limitations. Speaking of limitations, the first challenge related to using AI in research, as many of you probably know by now, is that these applications make errors and they can be biased. In the paper that we wrote, we make a distinction between random errors and systemic errors. So normally systemic errors, we refer to them also as biases. Let's think about what do we mean with error. So in the context of using AI, error is the difference between the output of an AI and the correct output. Now, random errors are those that have no discernible pattern, but systemic errors are those that have a discernible pattern. That's the difference. We argue that in the context of using AI in research, systemic errors are a lot more detrimental to science than random ones because they may consistently have a negative effect on decisions that may involve people, projects, paradigms, whatever. And we provide various examples of systemic biases in AI, particularly in biomedical applications. For the most part, the reason why these systemic errors happen is due to biases that were in the training data and then were carried forward to AI models. For example, we know that race, ethnicity, and gender biases are prevalent in our historical data. And when these are used to train an AI model, the AI system will ultimately also be biased because its training data has been biased. Another source of bias and systemic error pertains to algorithmic biases. So these are biases that are in the algorithms, which are also prevalent as well because algorithms are designed by humans who are also ultimately biased in certain ways. And the ethical problems in all of these cases is mostly about the propagation of stigmas, discrimination, and harming individuals or communities that had already been marginalized. In terms of random errors, even after extensive training, AI can make these errors, and they are very difficult to find. And maybe after exploring, I don't know, millions of them, we can finally find a pattern and a discernible pattern. But the idea is that at the moment when they happen, they are stochastic and are randomly distributed. What could be an example? An example is, for instance, the hallucinated references by systems like ChatGPT. These errors are randomly erroneous. And one reason why random errors occur is because AI systems process information different from humans. For example, in the context of randomly erroneous citations that I just mentioned, we read and cite, but ChatGPT produces citations by processing a huge amount of text data and then generates a highly probable response, a highly probable citation. That is why it is randomly erroneous. Now, speaking of errors and biases, before we move on to the next couple of issues, I'd like to discuss this image for a second. So I generated this using Stability AI. My prompt was using artificial intelligence in a research lab with Muslims. And this is what the AI generated. I have to add that this is disrespectful, especially to Muslim women, because of the connotations with the stereotype of hijab-wearing women who may have rough or masculine features. For those of you who have not identified it, there is a blatant error here, which is that the face of a man is on the head and body of a woman. The bias, though, is that the system seems to assume that any Muslim person is supposed to have facial hair. Now, here, the error and biases could be because of lack of representation or algorithmic biases. Nevertheless, we have a major advantage here, which is that the error and bias are so blatant and very easy to see. But when we use AI in research, not all errors and biases are so apparent. And this is a very strong argument in favor of using these systems very cautiously and only in contexts where we have sufficient judgment and expertise to actually be able to identify errors and biases. If not, if we don't have that expertise, then we're basically hampering trust in research and scientific discoveries because we're using systems that in contexts that we are not experts in it ourselves, and therefore we cannot see errors and biases. Regarding other problems, we know that AI lacks the capacities that are essential for moral agency. For instance, capacities like consciousness, self-concepts, experiences, goals, emotions, and so on. And as a result, we cannot hold AI accountable. So even if AI makes a catastrophic mistake, we cannot sanction it. We may be able to say, hey, don't use this AI model for that specific task, but nevertheless, the AI will not be liable. And this is key in discussions about ethics and integrity, because in a weird way, AI is making contributions. AI is a contributor, and yet it cannot be held accountable or liable. And these accountabilities and liabilities are always outsourced to humans who may use it or to those who are in charge of it. And this lack of moral agency and accountability, when it's combined with other limitations like a disconnect from the physical world, it can produce really dangerous results. Let me give two examples. In 2021, Alexa, many of you might know, the Amazon system instructed a 10-year-old girl to stick a penny into an electric outlet when the girl asked for a challenge to do. The system is disconnected from the world. The system doesn't know that the kid might do whatever weird command it gives. Another example, 2023, a Belgian man was allegedly encouraged to commit suicide by an AI that was playing the role of a therapist. You may be thinking, these are really fringe cases. They're really rare examples. Maybe that person was in a vulnerable position. They didn't have the capacity. Like, you can really come up with all kinds of reasons why this happened to sort of cleanse the AI. But the idea is that, in the context of research, the same limitation can hamper ethics and integrity. So, for instance, AI could provide unethical or harmful suggestions for data collection. It can provide recommendations that would really harm certain groups or individuals. Example, for instance, in 2022, some researchers used AI to generate 40,000 new possible chemical weapons. You can find the paper on Nature Machine Intelligence. I think it's a very interesting example. And I can assure you that many more examples are possible to use AI for malicious purposes, or to bypass regulations or so on. Another major problem in discussions about AI ethics is the black box problem. Briefly, the problem is about our inability to understand how AI systems exactly work. For instance, in the context of generative AI systems, this is related to weightings attached to inputs and artificial neural network layers, and all the sort of mathematical computations that produce outputs from the inputs. Now, the opacity is ethically problematic because we should not use the systems we don't understand ultimately to preserve trust in science. Also, there's people who claim that this issue of black box problem can negatively affect other aspects of research, like consent issues, because we are not able to fully explain how we achieved a certain outcome to our research subjects or in our methods, and so that could nullify consent, or it could, again, negatively impact trust in science because we are unable to explain it. Now, there are also counter arguments to the black box problem. There's people who say, do you really need to understand exactly how everything works? Like, do you exactly understand how paracetamol or microwave works? Do you exactly understand how this Zoom call is moved? Like, do you know exactly all the nitty-gritty of how this works? Well, no. What matters is that these systems work as they're intended. And so, we shouldn't worry about it. In the paper, we say this is a no response because it just tells us not to worry about the black box problem. But in fact, there are three very specific ethical issues that should concern us. One of them is that, if something goes wrong with a tool or technology, we want to know how it works to prevent future incidents, and we want to make sure that we can hold certain parties accountable. Now, again, we hit the accountability wall in terms of AI here, but in terms of preventing it from happening again, we really need to know how something works. Otherwise, we cannot prevent future accidents. The second one is about regulatory agencies. So this lack of understanding about how AI works can create a regulatory vacuum. When regulations, like say, when FDA wants to make decisions about approval of a new product, they really need to know how the product works because they want to make informed decisions and make decisions that are publicly defensible. But if they don't know how it works, then they cannot make those informed decisions. And the third one is that whatever kind of consumer of science or whatever kind of product we're talking about, they will not be satisfied with black boxes. I, as a researcher, I'm not satisfied with the black box because the products I use, like the laptop I use, I assume that some expert understand exactly how each component of this system works. And that is how you build trust. But if you have a system that has a certain component in it that no one knows how it works, even the experts don't know how it works, then trust is eroded. So these are some of the challenges that we have discussed in the paper. And then we end the paper with some recommendations, and I'm hoping that in the rest of this presentation, I'll be able to go through these quickly and explain why each recommendation is made and why it matters. And I'm hoping that this will also be a good way to, prime us for the conversation and discussion. So the first one is that researchers are responsible for identifying, describing, reducing, and controlling AI-related biases and random errors. So, just as I was talking, machines cannot be held accountable. They are ultimately tools and nothing else. So one line of thinking is that for the same reason that a knife cannot be held accountable for the murder, AI can also not be held accountable for its mistakes. And I think here we face a sort of paradox because, a knife cannot speak. A knife is a very limited tool, but certain AI models are programmed to communicate with us. They have many capabilities. They can make recommendations that are sometimes, spot on and sometimes outright wrong. So, perhaps when we think about responsibilities, we should be aware of AI capabilities compared to other tools. But ultimately, it is up to us, it is up to researchers to try and identify and describe these biases. The second one is that researchers should disclose, describe, and explain their use of AI in research, including its limitations, in language that can be understood by non-experts. So many of you might have heard about, for instance, the explainable AI movement. There is a lot of discussion around, well, you say explainable, but explainable to who and explainable to what extent, And here we try to sort of foster that idea of transparency. I think at this point, there is a consensus, at least in my understanding from the research community, there is a consensus that when these tools are used in research, you should disclose it. And one reason for this is, about credit, because if you use a tool that does a certain task for you, you don't want to take credit for that task. You want to say that this was done by this machine. I'm not taking credit for it. The other reason is related to the first recommendation, which is, responsibilities and accountabilities. By disclosing what tools we use and by disclosing the limitations of these tools, we ensure that others know how and what tools are used and, what biases may be involved. I think they also foster openness and facilitate reproducibility. Again, huge caveat here, I think, is that one of major AI limitations is in terms of reproducibility, like especially with generative AI models, they cannot be reproduced all the time. And many empirical studies have highlighted challenges of, reproducibility. At the moment, we have no solution for this, other than, suggesting researchers to try and reproduce their own work. And if the AI fails the task, well, then disclose this as a limitation. Like if you use an AI model to analyze your data, try to do it several times to see if it is reproducible. We understand that this may not always be possible if the task is very complicated or is very expensive. Like there's AI modeling and data analysis that may take weeks. So, reproducing that kind of work several times is going to be extremely costly. But if you're using just a simple model, the idea is to try and reproduce your own work using the same system to see if you get the same response several times. The third issue is, again, kind of related to biases and errors. So we ask researchers to use AI only in situations in which they have sufficient expertise and use it responsibly. So we know that AI enables us to explore contexts that we have no expertise in. I can use an AI model to, analyze a data set that is openly available on Zenodo and is about, I don't know, how the stars and constellations are located in relation to each other. But I have no expertise in that context. I can use AI to interpret it for me, but because I have no expertise, I cannot see its errors and biases. So the idea is to only use it in contexts where you have sufficient expertise. The fourth recommendation is motivated by two factors. So researchers should engage with impacted communities, populations, and other stakeholders concerning the use of AI in research to obtain their advice and assistance and address their interests and concerns, such as issues related to bias. This is motivated by two factors. First one is about AI capabilities that enable researchers to estimate how a certain population would have responded to a survey without even asking the opinion of these people. This may seem funny, but it is something that is happening. The second one is about biases that may impact research results and ultimately, certain communities and further stigmatize the group or propagate stereotypes. This is also important from the perspective of trust in science. By engaging with the affected communities and describing how the AI tools may work, we as researchers, we can prevent erosion of trust. For example, if you're conducting research about HIV patients or exploring the impact of using, say, social media on teenagers' mental health, and you're using an AI for data collection or analysis, you really want to communicate with a few members of these groups about your used methods and the employed AI, just to make sure that you're not making things worse for them. You're not missing any important issue within that context. Again, because AI enables us to explore certain contexts without actually being there, this suggestion would really push researchers to actually engage with those researchers, engage with the humans who may be affected ultimately. The fifth recommendation is researchers who intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly use AI to fabricate or falsify data or commit plagiarism are reliable for misconduct. This might seem like a no-brainer if you're in the ethics and integrity scene, but I would like to use this opportunity to remind everyone about how powerful AI systems can be, and the extent to which they can enable malicious users. Specifically about plagiarism, because AI models are trained on existing data, it's extremely hard to know when and to what extent AI is plagiarizing. I think this is one of those issues that could eventually affect even how we think about originality as a concept. Because for the most part, we've been using citations and referencing in research to give credit where it is due, but AI systems, particularly generative AI systems, work in ways that may require a whole new citation and referencing paradigm. But ultimately, we are responsible, we are liable. The sixth one is about synthetic data. So researchers who use synthetic data should indicate which parts of the data are synthetic, clearly label the synthetic data, describe how the data were generated, and explain how and why the data were used. This is one of those fascinating topics that I think we will...
Sorry, Mohammed, 3 more minutes, okay?
Okay. This is one of those fascinating topics that I think we will hear a lot more about it in the near future. Synthetic data can be very useful. For example, when you want to mask private information, or when we want to educate medical students without jeopardizing real people's data. But recently, we are facing some really conceptual and practical challenges. For example, it's very difficult to define what synthetic data is without the concept of real data. But then when we try to define real data, we cannot reach a consensus as to what makes real data, because many times real data has proxies or may use tools and methods that are not exactly real or are not exactly connected to the real world. In terms of practical challenges, we have not been able to guide use cases in ways that provide a sort of clear demarcation between synthetic and real data. Like, we don't know if FAIR principles, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, we don't know if these principles should also apply to synthetic data or not. So it's quite controversial, and that's why we are recommending a lot of transparency. The seventh recommendation is that AI systems cannot be named as authors, but their contribution to research should be disclosed and described. This is, I have a personal relation to this, and I have to admit that it was Mariette van der Hoven who actually encouraged me to think about authorship during my master's program. So the idea here is that because AI machines cannot be held responsible or accountable, and because they lack agency, they should not be authors. And we have written about this extensively, and there's other people who also have voiced various views, about why this matters or why they should not be authors. Should they be able to hold copyright? Should they be qualified for inventorship or so on? These are still debates that are ongoing, but there is no consensus about, there is no debate about whether they should be authors or not. Everybody agrees that they should not be authors, at least in the scientific context. The eighth recommendation is mostly about confidentiality and privacy. Like, they should not be used in situations that are likely to involve unauthorized disclosure of confidential information related to human research subjects. unpublished research, potential intellectual property claims, or propriety or classified research. This is basically what you all call GDPR in Europe, and also touches on peer review. We know that many AI systems use input data as training and then save these basically for eternity. And this is a major breach of confidentiality in some contexts. Some of you might have heard the NIH and the Australian Research Council banned the use of generative AI for reviewing their grants. And recently, Elsevier, the big publisher, they banned the use of generative AI in peer review, even if only it is aimed to improve the readability of your own peer review report. The last recommendation is about incorporating ethical issues of using AI in different RCR and ethics courses. And I'd be curious to know how many of you here who teach who teach ethics of research or research integrity actually include AI in your modules. I think not including AI and discussions about ethics of AI is a major oversight. But I have to admit that it is very challenging. One, because these tools and policies around them are evolving so fast. So you really need to follow the news about it, and you really have to update the course material every time you teach it. And two, because the challenges can be so context specific, like an AI system that is used in genomics is very different from an AI system that is used in molecular biology. And so if you want to have a meaningful discussion and conversation about it, you need to have field experts on board and need to do a lot of preparation and so on. With that, I hope that this was useful. I look forward to the conversations, and thanks again for this opportunity.